When powerful people face disrespect, they do not allow the first emotion to make the final decision. An insult may create anger. A public insult may wound their pride. A dismissive tone may make them feel challenged. But they understand that reacting instantly can turn another person's behavior into control over their own actions. If someone can make you lose your temper with a few words, force you to defend yourself with one accusation, or destroy your confidence with one opinion, then they have gained influence over you. This is why powerful people do not measure strength by how quickly they react. They measure it by how completely they control themselves. Most disrespectful situations are designed to create pressure. Someone may interrupt you, mock your ideas, question your ability, speak down to you, or try to embarrass you in front of others. In that moment, your ego may demand a fast response. You may want to prove that you are stronger, smarter, or more important. But powerful people know that a reaction driven by wounded pride often creates a second problem. Anger can make you speak without thinking. It can push you to reveal emotions you would rather keep private. It can make you exaggerate, threaten, or attack. Then the original disrespect becomes less important because everyone is now focused on your reaction. That is why powerful people create a pause. They do not pause because they are weak or afraid. They pause because they refuse to let another person decide the speed of their mind. Even a few seconds of silence can separate emotion from action. During that pause, they observe. They notice what was said, how it was said, who was present, and whether the behavior was careless or deliberate. They ask themselves, what is this person trying to achieve? Are they seeking attention, testing my boundaries, protecting their ego, or trying to provoke me? This calm observation gives them something emotional people often lose: choice. Powerful people understand that anger is not always the enemy. Anger can reveal that a line has been crossed. It can show that something feels unfair, disrespectful, or dishonest. But anger is information, not instruction. You can feel anger without obeying it. You can recognize that someone behaved badly without becoming careless yourself. The goal is not to suppress every emotion or pretend that disrespect does not matter. The goal is to prevent emotion from taking control of your judgment. This is why calmness can be more powerful than aggression. Many disrespectful people expect a predictable reaction. They expect you to become defensive, raise your voice, argue, or desperately prove your worth. When you remain composed, you refuse to give them the emotional response they expected. Your calmness creates uncertainty because they cannot easily control the direction of the interaction. You are no longer reacting according to their pressure. You are deciding according to your standards. But being calm does not mean accepting disrespect. Powerful people do not confuse self-control with silence in every situation. They know when a clear response is necessary. If a boundary has been crossed, they may speak directly and calmly. Do not speak to me that way. That behavior is not acceptable. We can continue this conversation when it is respectful. They do not need to shout because their strength does not depend on volume. Their words are clear because they are not trying to win an emotional contest. They are communicating a standard. The difference between a powerful response and an emotional reaction is purpose. An emotional reaction tries to release pain. A powerful response protects dignity, clarifies boundaries, and keeps control of the situation. When you react, you may focus on making the other person feel what you felt. When you respond, you focus on what outcome protects your values. This shift changes everything. You stop asking, how can I hurt them back? And begin asking, what action protects my self-respect? Sometimes the strongest response is silence. If someone is trying to provoke you publicly, an emotional argument may give them the attention they want. Refusing to perform can weaken their strategy. But silence is only powerful when it is chosen, not when it comes from fear. Powerful people remain silent because they have decided that the situation does not deserve their energy, not because they believe they have no right to speak. They know they can respond, but they also know they do not have to respond to every insult. Your response to disrespect also shapes how others see you. People may not remember every word spoken during a conflict, but they often remember who remained composed. They notice who could face pressure without losing control. Calmness communicates confidence because it shows that your identity is not fragile. You do not need to dominate every conversation to prove your value. You do not need to become cruel to show that you are strong. You can remain disciplined while making it clear that disrespect has consequences. This level of control requires practice. You may not become calm in every difficult situation immediately. Sometimes you will feel anger before you recognize what is happening. Sometimes you may respond too quickly and later wish you had handled it differently. But power is built through awareness. Each time you pause before reacting, you strengthen your ability to choose. Each time you refuse to let anger control your words, you become harder to provoke. Each time you protect your dignity without losing your discipline, you develop a stronger form of confidence. Powerful people do not allow disrespect to decide who they become in the moment. They refuse to let another person's behavior pull them away from their standards. They remain calm, not because disrespect is harmless, but because their self-control is more valuable than the temporary satisfaction of an emotional reaction. And once you control your reaction, you can look beyond the insult and understand the intention behind the disrespect before deciding what response is truly necessary. Powerful people do not treat every act of disrespect as if it carries the same meaning. They understand that behavior has context, and before choosing a response, they study what may be happening beneath the surface. A careless comment, a moment of frustration, a misunderstanding, and a deliberate attempt to humiliate you are not the same. If you react to all of them with equal force, you lose judgment. But if you ignore every form of disrespect, you weaken your standards. Real strength comes from seeing the difference and responding with clarity rather than pride. When someone speaks to you disrespectfully, the first question is not always, how do I make them regret this? A more powerful question is, what is this behavior trying to accomplish? Sometimes people act disrespectfully because they are insecure. They feel threatened by your confidence, your progress, your independence, or the respect you receive from others. Instead of confronting their insecurity, they try to reduce you. They make jokes at your expense, dismiss your achievements, question your abilities, or speak with unnecessary superiority. Their behavior may be less about your weakness and more about the discomfort your presence creates inside them. Other times, disrespect comes from emotional immaturity. A person may be frustrated and speak without thinking. They may be under pressure, misunderstand your intentions, or express themselves poorly. This does not make the behavior acceptable, but it changes how you approach it. Powerful people do not automatically assume that every mistake is a personal attack. They look for patterns. Has this happened before? Does the person take responsibility when corrected? Do they show genuine respect in other situations? One careless moment may require a calm conversation. Repeated behavior may require a stronger boundary. This ability to observe patterns protects you from two common mistakes. The first is becoming too sensitive and turning every disagreement into disrespect. Not everyone who disagrees with you is trying to diminish you. Not every criticism is an insult. Sometimes another person is offering useful feedback, even if they express it imperfectly. Powerful people can separate disagreement from disrespect because their confidence does not depend on being constantly praised. They listen carefully and ask whether there is truth in what they hear. If there is, they learn. If there is not, they do not allow every opinion to become a threat. The second mistake is making excuses for repeated disrespect. Some people ignore warning signs because they want to keep the peace. They tell themselves, maybe they didn't mean it. Again and again, even when the same behavior continues, they forgive without requiring change. They remain available to people who repeatedly cross the same boundaries. But powerful people understand that intention matters and patterns matter even more. A person may claim they did not mean to hurt you, but if the behavior continues after you have communicated clearly, the pattern becomes information. At that point, you are no longer dealing only with a mistake. You are learning how much respect that person is willing to show your boundaries. Powerful people also recognize that some disrespect is a test. Certain individuals push limits to discover what they can get away with. They make a small insult, dismiss a minor boundary, or speak with subtle contempt. Then they observe your response. If you laugh it off while feeling uncomfortable, remain silent because you fear conflict, or immediately forgive without addressing the behavior, they may interpret that as permission. This does not mean you must become suspicious of everyone. It means you must pay attention when words and actions repeatedly reveal the same pattern. Understanding intention also helps you avoid giving energy to people who are seeking attention. Some individuals provoke because conflict makes them feel powerful. They want an emotional reaction because your anger gives them influence. If you argue endlessly, you may enter the exact game they created. Powerful people recognize when a conversation is no longer about truth or understanding. They know when someone is trying to create chaos rather than solve a problem. In those situations, calm distance may be more effective than endless explanation, but observation is not passive. It is preparation. Once powerful people understand the nature of the disrespect, they choose the response that fits the situation. If the behavior was unintentional, they clarify. If it was careless, they correct it. If it was repeated, they establish a firm boundary. If it was deliberately harmful, they reduce access or leave the situation. They do not use the same response for every person because power is not automatic behavior. Power is the ability to act with awareness. This is why emotional control must come before judgment. If anger controls you, you may assume the worst without evidence. If fear controls you, you may excuse behavior that should never be accepted. But when you are calm, you can see more clearly. You can notice whether the person respects you when there is nothing to gain. You can observe how they behave when you disagree. You can see whether they apologize and change, or apologize only to repeat the same behavior. Over time, patterns reveal character more honestly than promises. You do not need to become obsessed with analyzing every person. The purpose is not paranoia. The purpose is discernment. You are learning to protect your dignity without allowing ego to create unnecessary enemies. You are learning that not every insult deserves a battle, but every repeated violation deserves attention. You are learning to respond according to facts, not assumptions. The powerful person does not ask, asterisk, how can I win this argument? They ask, asterisk, what does this behavior reveal, and what response protects my standards? That question prevents you from wasting energy on pride and helps you make decisions that serve your long-term peace. And once you understand the intention and recognize the pattern, you can set clear boundaries without begging anyone to treat you with respect. Powerful people do not beg for respect, chase it, or repeatedly explain why they deserve it. They understand that respect cannot be forced through long arguments or emotional speeches. You can tell someone how you want to be treated, but you cannot control whether they choose to honor that standard. What you can control is your response when they refuse. This is where boundaries become a source of power. A boundary is not a request for someone to change. It is a clear decision about what behavior you will accept and what you will do if that behavior continues. Many people believe that setting a boundary means becoming aggressive. They imagine raising their voice, making threats, or creating fear. But powerful boundaries do not require drama. In fact, the strongest boundaries are often calm, simple, and consistent. You may say, asterisk, do not speak to me that way. You may say, asterisk, I am willing to discuss this, but not while you are insulting me. You may say, asterisk, if this continues, I will end the conversation. These words are not meant to control the other person. They communicate your standard and make your next action clear. The people who struggle most with disrespect often make one mistake. They keep explaining after the boundary has already been understood. They repeat their feelings, defend their position, and search for the perfect words that will finally make the other person care. But if someone clearly understands your boundary and continues crossing it, more explanation may not create more respect. Sometimes the issue is not that they failed to understand. The issue is that they do not expect consequences. Powerful people recognize this difference. They do not confuse repeated explanation with strength. A boundary without action can become a suggestion. If you say, asterisk, do not treat me this way, but remain in the same situation every time the behavior repeats, the other person may learn that your words have no weight. This does not mean you must punish them or seek revenge. It means your actions must match your standards. If someone continues insulting you, you may end the conversation. If they repeatedly dismiss your time, you may reduce your availability. If they continue violating your trust, you may create distance. The consequence is not designed to hurt them. It is designed to protect you. Powerful people do not announce consequences they are unwilling to follow. Empty threats weaken credibility and create unnecessary conflict. They avoid statements like, asterisk, you will regret this, or asterisk, I will make you pay. Those words often come from wounded pride and may turn the situation into a power struggle. Instead, they focus on what they control, asterisk, if this conversation continues in this way, I am leaving. This is not a threat. It is a decision. You are not trying to force someone to behave. You are deciding what access they receive if they choose not to respect your limits. One reason people fear boundaries is that boundaries may change relationships. When you stop accepting behavior that you once tolerated, others may react. They may say you have changed. They may accuse you of becoming cold, difficult, or disrespectful. This can create guilt, especially if you are used to keeping everyone comfortable. But discomfort does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. Sometimes people are uncomfortable because they benefited from your lack of one. Your responsibility is not to make every person happy with your standards. Your responsibility is to communicate those standards fairly and live by them consistently. Consistency is what gives boundaries their strength. You do not need to repeat the same warning every week. You do not need to become louder each time. Your behavior should communicate that your standards are stable. If you remain calm when someone crosses a line and follow through without drama, people learn that your words are reliable. They understand that you are not easily manipulated by guilt, pressure, or emotional reactions. This creates respect because others can see that you are guided by principles rather than temporary moods. Boundaries also protect your self-respect. Every time you ignore behavior that deeply violates your values, you may begin losing trust in yourself. You may feel angry with the other person, but part of your frustration may come from knowing that you allowed something to continue. When you set a boundary and honor it, you send yourself a different message, asterisk, my dignity matters, my time matters, my voice matters. This internal trust becomes the foundation of confidence. You no longer need every person to validate you because you know you will not abandon yourself when pressure appears. However, boundaries must remain fair. Powerful people do not use them to control harmless differences. They do not demand that everyone agree with them or behave exactly as they want. Disagreement is not automatically disrespect. A boundary should protect your dignity, safety, time, or values, not force another person to surrender their independence. This distinction prevents boundaries from becoming another form of control. Sometimes a calm conversation is enough. A person may not realize how their behavior affected you. When you speak clearly, they may apologize and change. In that case, the boundary strengthens the relationship because it creates honesty. But if the behavior continues, you have learned something important. You cannot force respect, but you can decide how much access a disrespectful person receives. That decision is yours. Powerful people do not wait for others to recognize their worth before protecting it. They do not keep returning to the same disrespectful situation, hoping that one more explanation will create change. They communicate once with clarity, observe the response, and allow their actions to support their words. Their confidence does not come from making others obey. It comes from knowing that they can protect their standards without losing emotional control. Respect is not something you should have to beg for. You demonstrate its importance by the behavior you accept, the limits you communicate, and the actions you take when those limits are ignored. And once your boundaries become clear and consistent, you no longer need to turn disrespect into a desperate battle to prove your worth. One of the biggest mistakes people make after being disrespected is turning the situation into a desperate battle for approval. They do not only want the disrespect to stop, they want the other person to finally recognize their value. They begin explaining their intentions, defending their character, listing everything they have done, and searching for the perfect argument that will force the other person to respect them. But powerful people understand that the more you chase validation from someone who has already chosen to dismiss you, the more control you give them over your self-worth. When someone disrespects you, Your ego may demand proof. You may think, asterisk, I will show them who I am. I will make them regret underestimating me. I will prove that I deserve respect. But there is a hidden danger in this mindset. Your confidence becomes dependent on their response. You begin measuring your value through the eyes of the very person who refused to see it. Every time they ignore you, you feel the need to explain more. Every time they criticize you, you feel pressure to defend yourself. Every time they doubt you, you work harder to gain their approval. Without realizing it, you allow their opinion to become the center of your decisions. Powerful people do not build their identity around winning every argument. They understand that some people are not looking for truth. They are looking for control, attention, or superiority. No amount of explanation can create respect in someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. If a person has already decided to see you through jealousy, insecurity, or arrogance, your constant defense may only give them more opportunities to challenge you. This is why powerful people know when to speak and when to stop. They do not continue explaining after the truth has already been made clear. There is a difference between communicating your position and begging to be believed. Communication says, asterisk, what happened, and this is where I stand. Approval seeking says, asterisk, please understand me, please agree with me, please tell me I am still valuable. The first comes from self-respect. The second comes from fear. Powerful people communicate with clarity, but they do not surrender their peace, trying to control another person's opinion. They understand that being misunderstood is uncomfortable, but it is not always dangerous. You can survive someone having the wrong idea about you. You do not have to correct every assumption or defend yourself against every accusation. This becomes especially important when disrespect happens in front of others. You may feel pressure to respond immediately because you fear that silence will make you appear weak. You may want to expose the other person, embarrass them, or prove that you are superior. But powerful people do not allow an audience to control their behavior. They understand that public conflict can become a performance. The disrespectful person may be trying to create a reaction, gain attention, or establish dominance. If you become emotional, you may help them turn the situation into a spectacle. A calm response, a clear boundary, or a decision to leave can protect your dignity more effectively than a long public battle. Powerful people also refuse to compete for respect. They do not try to become louder, more successful, more attractive, or more influential simply to make one person regret disrespecting them. Growth driven only by revenge creates another form of dependence. Even if you achieve everything, you may still be waiting for the other person to notice. Your success remains emotionally connected to their approval. True power begins when you improve because you value your own potential, not because you need someone else to feel ashamed. This does not mean you should ignore false accusations or allow lies to damage your reputation. Sometimes a clear response is necessary. You may correct the facts, protect your name, or address harmful behavior directly. But even then, your goal should be clarity, not emotional victory. You do not need to destroy the other person to protect yourself. You do not need everyone to agree with you to remain confident. You can state the truth once, act consistently, and allow time and behavior to reveal your character. The need to prove yourself often comes from an internal fear. Asterisk, if they do not respect me, maybe I am not worthy of respect. But another person's behavior cannot determine your value. A disrespectful person may fail to recognize your strengths because they are focused on their own insecurity. They may dismiss you because admitting your value would challenge their ego. They may treat everyone poorly because they lack emotional maturity. Their behavior gives information about them, but it does not become a final judgment about you. Powerful people understand that self-respect must exist before external respect can become meaningful. If you do not trust your own values, you may chase validation everywhere. You may accept disrespect from people whose approval you want. You may change your personality to remain accepted. But when you know who you are, you become less desperate to convince others. You can listen to criticism without collapsing. You can accept disagreement without feeling threatened. You can walk away from someone who refuses to treat you fairly without believing that you have lost your worth. There is also strength in allowing people to reveal themselves. When you stop arguing for your value, you create space to observe. Does the person become more respectful when you stop chasing? Do they take responsibility? Do they change their behavior? Or do they continue dismissing you because they were never interested in understanding? Their actions answer questions that endless arguments cannot. You no longer waste energy trying to force a conclusion. You let patterns reveal the truth. The goal is not to become indifferent to respect. Respect matters. Dignity matters. But powerful people do not confuse demanding respect with chasing approval. They establish standards, communicate clearly, and then choose their level of access. They do not place their identity in the hands of someone who treats them poorly. They remain focused on their values, their growth, and the life they are building. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth to every person who questions it, you recover energy that can be used to strengthen yourself. You become calmer because you no longer treat every insult as a test of your identity. You become more confident because your value is no longer waiting for permission. And you become harder to control because approval is no longer the price you are willing to pay for peace. Powerful people do not need every person to recognize their value. They protect their dignity, let their actions speak, and refuse to turn disrespect into a lifelong struggle for validation. And when someone repeatedly ignores your standards, powerful people do not chase, argue, or create drama. They understand when distance becomes the clearest consequence. Powerful people understand that access to their time, attention, trust, and presence is not unlimited. They do not use distance as a trick to make people chase them, nor do they disappear to create confusion or punish someone emotionally. They create distance when repeated disrespect shows that closeness is no longer healthy. Their silence is not a game. Their absence is not manipulation. It is a consequence of recognizing that respect has been violated and that continued access would only reward the behavior. Many people remain too close to those who repeatedly disrespect them because they fear being misunderstood. They think, asterisk, if I step back, they may believe I am angry. If I stop responding, they may think I am weak. If I leave, they may say I am selfish. So they stay available, continue explaining, and keep giving chances long after the pattern has become clear. But powerful people do not allow fear of judgment to keep them inside relationships that damage their dignity. They understand that staying close to repeated disrespect can silently communicate that the behavior has no real consequence. Distance becomes necessary when words have already been used and the behavior continues. If you have calmly explained your boundary, clarified what is unacceptable, and given the person an opportunity to change, you do not need to repeat the same conversation forever. Repeated explanations can become a form of emotional begging. You keep hoping that one more discussion will create the respect that their actions have already refused to show. Powerful people know when communication has reached its limit. They stop trying to convince someone to value what that person repeatedly chooses to ignore. Creating distance does not always mean ending a relationship completely. Sometimes it means reducing access. You may stop sharing personal information with someone who repeatedly uses it against you. You may limit conversations with a person who constantly insults or dismisses you. You may stop making yourself available to someone who only contacts you when they need something. You may remain polite while becoming less emotionally open. Distance can be quiet, measured, and appropriate. It does not have to become a dramatic announcement. Powerful people do not always explain their distance in detail. If the reason has already been communicated, repeating it may only create another argument. Some people will understand without a long explanation. Others may pretend not to understand because confusion allows them to avoid responsibility. You do not have to keep proving that your boundary is reasonable. Your actions can communicate what your words have already made clear. However, distance should not be used impulsively. Powerful people do not disappear after every disagreement or withdraw simply because someone challenged them. Disagreement is not automatically disrespect. Healthy relationships include differences, mistakes, and uncomfortable conversations. If you create distance every time someone disagrees with you, you may avoid growth rather than protect your dignity. The purpose is not to escape discomfort. The purpose is to respond wisely when there is a repeated pattern of contempt, humiliation, manipulation, or disregard for clear boundaries. This is why intention and pattern matter. A single mistake may require a conversation. A repeated violation may require a consequence. Powerful people observe whether someone listens, takes responsibility, and changes. An apology without changed behavior may become another way to preserve access without earning trust. When words remain the same but actions never improve, distance becomes a practical decision. You are no longer judging promises. You are responding to reality. Some people may react strongly when you reduce access. They may accuse you of being cold, arrogant, or unforgiving. They may suddenly become more attentive because they feel they are losing the benefits of your presence. But powerful people do not return immediately just because someone becomes uncomfortable. They watch for consistent change. Temporary kindness after a boundary may be genuine, but it may also be an attempt to restore the old arrangement. Trust is rebuilt through repeated behavior, not emotional promises made under pressure. Distance also gives you something valuable: perspective. When you are constantly inside a disrespectful dynamic, you may become confused. You may normalize behavior that should concern you. You may begin questioning your own judgment because you are always responding to the other person's emotions. Stepping back creates space to think clearly. Without constant pressure, you can ask, how do I feel after interacting with this person? Do they respect my limits? Do I become smaller around them? Am I always defending myself? These questions help you see the relationship without the confusion created by constant emotional involvement. Powerful people are willing to be alone rather than remain connected at the cost of their self-respect. This does not mean they reject relationships or believe they need nobody. It means they do not treat access to another person as more valuable than their own dignity. They understand that loneliness can be temporary, but repeated disrespect can slowly damage confidence and identity. They choose peace over constant emotional conflict, not because they are avoiding people, but because they are protecting the conditions necessary for growth. The strongest form of distance is often calm. You do not need to announce that you are leaving to prove your power. You do not need to post messages meant to make someone feel guilty. You do not need to create jealousy or use silence as a weapon. You simply stop giving the same level of access to someone who repeatedly demonstrates that they cannot handle it with respect. Your actions become clear without becoming cruel. This is not revenge. Revenge tries to create pain in the other person. Distance protects peace in you. Revenge keeps you emotionally connected because you remain focused on whether they suffer. Distance allows you to move forward because you stop making their reaction the center of your life. You are not stepping back to make them chase you. You are stepping back because you have decided that your dignity does not require their permission. When you use distance as a consequence rather than a game, you stop rewarding disrespect with unlimited access. You become more selective about who receives your trust, attention, and energy. You learn that protecting your peace does not require anger, and that leaving a harmful pattern does not require hatred. And once distance gives you clarity, you can transform the experience of disrespect into discipline, stronger judgment, and personal growth. The final way powerful people handle disrespect is by refusing to let it become the center of their lives. They do not spend years replaying an insult, planning revenge, or waiting for the person who hurt them to recognize their value. They understand that disrespect can either become a wound that controls them or a lesson that strengthens them. The difference depends on what they choose to do after the experience. Powerful people do not deny the pain, but they refuse to build their identity around it. They take what the situation revealed, improve their judgment, strengthen their standards, and move forward with greater discipline. When someone disrespects you, the easiest response is to become obsessed with proving them wrong. You may imagine becoming more successful, so they regret underestimating you. You may replay the moment and create perfect responses you wish you had given. You may wait for an apology that never comes. But when your growth depends on their regret, they still control your direction. Your success becomes connected to their opinion. Your motivation remains tied to the person who hurt you. Powerful people understand that revenge creates an invisible attachment. Even when you appear to be moving forward, your mind may still be asking, asterisk, have they noticed me yet? Real power begins when you stop making your growth a message for someone else. You improve because you respect your potential. You become more disciplined because your future matters. You build confidence because you want to trust yourself, not because you need a disrespectful person to feel ashamed. The moment your progress no longer requires an audience, your strength becomes more stable. You are no longer performing success. You are building a life that reflects your values. Disrespect can also become valuable information. It may reveal that you ignored warning signs. Perhaps you allowed small insults because you wanted to keep the peace. Perhaps you trusted someone before observing their character. Perhaps you failed to communicate a boundary because you feared conflict. Powerful people examine these possibilities without turning reflection into self-blame. They do not say, asterisk, I deserve to be treated badly. Instead, they ask, asterisk, what can I learn so I recognize this pattern earlier and protect myself more effectively next time? This question transforms pain into awareness. Every difficult experience can strengthen judgment when you study it honestly. You may learn to pay more attention to actions than promises. You may become more careful about who receives your trust. You may recognize that repeated disrespect should not be excused simply because someone occasionally behaves well. You may learn that confidence is not only about speaking strongly, it is also about leaving situations that repeatedly violate your standards. These lessons make you wiser without requiring you to become bitter. Powerful people do not allow disrespect to turn them into disrespectful people. This is one of the most important forms of self-mastery. After being hurt, you may feel tempted to become cold, suspicious, or cruel. You may decide that kindness is weakness and that everyone must be treated as a potential enemy. But pain does not have to become your personality. You can become more selective without becoming closed. You can build stronger boundaries without losing compassion. You can become more careful without becoming fearful. The goal is not to harden your heart. The goal is to strengthen your judgment. Discipline becomes the place where powerful people redirect emotional energy. Instead of spending every day thinking about the insult, they return to their work. They improve their skills. They protect their health. They develop their knowledge. They strengthen their habits. They invest in relationships that are built on mutual respect. This does not mean using productivity to avoid emotion. It means refusing to let pain consume every part of life. You acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and then place your energy where it can create something meaningful. There will be moments when the memory returns. You may still feel anger when you remember how someone treated you. Powerful people do not judge themselves for feeling that emotion. They simply refuse to let the memory decide their behavior. They remind themselves, asterisk, that experience happened, but it does not control what I become. This is how emotional strength develops. You stop waiting for the past to change and begin choosing what you will build next. Your response to disrespect also becomes a lesson to yourself. When you remain calm, establish boundaries, stop chasing approval, and create distance when necessary, you build self-trust. You prove that you can protect your dignity without losing control. This self-trust is more valuable than the approval you once wanted. It creates confidence that does not depend on whether others understand you. You know that even if someone treats you poorly, you will not abandon yourself. Over time, you may realize that the disrespect was not only a painful event. It was a moment that revealed where your standards needed to become stronger. It showed you what behavior you would no longer accept. It taught you the difference between being patient and tolerating repeated harm. It forced you to examine whether you were seeking approval from people who had not earned your trust. The experience did not make you powerful by itself. Your response created the power. This is why powerful people do not need the final word. They do not need to win every argument or receive every apology. They understand that closure does not always come from the person who caused the pain. Sometimes closure comes from your decision to stop returning to the same pattern. It comes from recognizing the lesson, changing your behavior, and refusing to repeat what once weakened you. The strongest answer to disrespect is not becoming louder, harsher, or more obsessed with revenge. It is becoming more disciplined, more aware, and more difficult to manipulate. It is building a life where your identity is not controlled by praise or damaged by insult. It is knowing that another person's behavior can challenge you without defining you. Powerful people do not allow disrespect to destroy their confidence. They use it to strengthen their boundaries, sharpen their judgment, and deepen their self-respect. They turn pain into information, anger into discipline, and disappointment into growth. Then they move forward without needing anyone's permission. In the end, real power is not making people fear you after they disrespect you. It is becoming so grounded in self-control and self-respect that their behavior can no longer control who you are.